Okay, welcome everyone. It is time to wrap this up. You've attended a lot of sessions, I'm quite sure, over the last 3 days. Seeing some tired faces in the audience. So let's make this a nice and relaxed last 60 minutes of this event, unless you're attending a workshop tomorrow. Some of you might be returning. But it is time to wrap up the regular sessions. I have one confession to make. I have one confession to make for this audience. I think the last line of code I wrote was about 7 years ago. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Well, if you do not count my daily struggles with HTML, publishing anything on any content management system or blogging platform, I don't know why it is so difficult. My God, I always have to switch to HTML view to get rid of all those things like bold, 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 some kind of sentence, slash bold, slash bold, slash bold, slash bold, slash bold, right? I mean, even I, many years ago, knew how to use regular expressions and split and trim functions, so that's something that still annoys me. But anyways, I was so bad at being a software developer that my fellow team members begged my CEO to promote me away to management. That was a good number of years ago. So this talk is called the creative worker. I will tell you in a moment why that is the case. I have been developing software for a little while. I started as a software engineer, actually. I studied in Delft, University of Delft in the Netherlands. Holland is my home country. But pretty soon I ended up in management jobs. I didn't know how to do that. I only knew how to work with computers. So for me, software developers were simply computers on legs with too much hair. Debugging was the most annoying thing. But I tried, and it took me about 20 years, I think, to do this properly. And I learned how to manage software organizations, and I wrote a couple of books about that. Management 3.0, How to Change the World, and my last book is here on the table, Workout. And because of those books, I am being invited to conferences all around the world, talking about managing software organizations and other kinds of creative businesses. And I want to expand that topic a little bit, talking about creativity. That is what my session is about. But first, I want to share a story with you. One of my favorite stories. So it was not long after I had finished my studies in Delft. It was 1998, if I remember well. I got a message from my internet provider. My internet provider sent me an email and said that my website was going through the bandwidth limit, going through the roof in terms of traffic assigned allowed per customer. And actually, they complimented me in that email message because they said this was their first website to do so that was not about porn. I was very proud of that. Because I had just a simple HTML page with the 100 most popular PC games in the world. It was very simple. I just registered votes and turned it into a list. Many such websites nowadays, but that was one of the first. And I made some good money with advertising and sponsorship at that time. It was 1999. And considering that this was the upward slope of the internet hype, I drew the obvious conclusion, which was I have to turn this into an internet startup. Obviously, everyone was doing internet startups at that time. My mother was considering an internet startup. So I wrote a fabulous-looking business plan. I wrote a fabulous-looking business plan with all kinds of diagrams of what the business would look like, how it would develop. The plan said that the revenue would go up, the profits would go up, number of employees would go up, my ego would go up, everything would go up, according to the plan. I won an award with that. They made me Entrepreneur of the Year, 1999 in the Netherlands, for a plan. You see that? That's interesting, huh? I hadn't done anything. It was a plan. In hindsight now, me being an author, I call it my first work of fiction. I was awarded for my first work of fiction at that time. It had everything. It had heroes, dangerous environment, plot points, enemies. They should have named me Fantasy Writer of the Year, I think, in hindsight. The only thing missing was 3 dragons, but everything else was in there. But anyways, I turned that internet startup into a real business, and I hired people because I found some informal investors who wanted to invest money in my internet startup. And we were very successful, the 7 of us, at spending all that money to the last euro. We didn't find any customers, though. That was a bit of an issue. Because, well, as soon as we started, 2 months later, the internet bubble burst. And all our income dried up from advertising, sponsorship. Nobody was spending any money anymore on just improvising here, on startups. So we tried other things. We pivoted, as they say in the lean startup movement. Oh, how we pivoted. Like a drunken ballerina on a Segway, we pivoted. But we couldn't find any other business models that worked. So the whole venture had to close down. No bankruptcy, just 0 at the end, and I had to find a decent job. But it was a useful experiment. I learned something from from those days. The thing I learned was that customers do not buy business plans. It was a very useful learning experience. So that was one of many. And I'm going to share with you one of my favorite diagrams that will sort of be the introduction to the rest of the presentation, which is about running experiments. So here you see a nice-looking diagram that I basically based upon the work of Donald Reinerson. I don't know if any of you have read his book. He's awesome. He's a very intelligent person, but nobody is able to read his books. It's far too difficult. I based his diagram on his books. And basically, Donald says that we apply practices in software development, in management, everywhere, because they make sense, because they usually lead to success. That's why we call them good practices. But sometimes good practices fail. It happens. Even good practices fail every now and then. We also sometimes make mistakes, bad practices. But I call them mistakes because usually we don't do them intentionally. Those mistakes usually lead to failure. Obviously, that's why we call them mistakes. But sometimes the mistakes are actually successful. Ooh, you lucky bastard. You fuck things up and still you're successful, right? That's an interesting area. What is important is the area in the middle, where we run experiments, when we do something that we've never done before, like me starting an internet company, right? Never done that before. It can succeed, it can fail. And Donald says when you have a 50-50 chance of failing, according to information theory, you have an optimal learning experience, because you don't know what the outcome will be. So learning is optimal when we run experiments. So we should celebrate learning. That is very important. There's nothing to learn when we just repeat good practices. There's nothing to learn when we just repeat similar stupid mistakes. We learn something when good practices fail. Aha, interesting. Or when bad practices, mistakes, succeed. That is interesting. So what does not make sense is what I sometimes hear at conferences, particularly Agile conferences, where people say, let's celebrate failure. That makes no sense at all, right? Because you would be celebrating all kinds of failures, including the ones that are a result of mistakes. Why would you celebrate those? Some people say we should celebrate success. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. But there's a very dangerous aspect here. If you only celebrate successes, you basically incentivize people to move in that direction, which happens in many organizations where people are only complimented for outcomes, or they get bonuses for sales, etc. You send them in the direction of repeating good practices. But then, who is going to run the experiments? Who is going to learn? Be creative and innovative. because that takes place mainly in the middle, with people who run experiments. Now, the interesting thing is, networks are great at running experiments, at finding the opportunities in the fitness landscape, as the scientists say. Exploration of unknown terrain. Exploration is key in the middle. Hierarchies, interestingly enough, are very good at repeating the same practices, at exploitation of an opportunity. When we know that something works, we'll just do it again and again and find the best practices to drive for efficiency. When those hierarchies are big, we call them enterprises, for example. I think hierarchies are also very good at repeating the same mistakes endlessly. When those are big, we call them governments. But what we need is hierarchies and networks, both in the middle and on the left side, my left side, your right. We need a bit of both. Like the first smartphone was invented by a small group of very smart people, a network of people, including Steve Jobs and a number of others. That was where they experimented and came up with an interesting idea. And then the other 700 million copies were produced with a hierarchy. So by all means, celebrate success, but you should also celebrate experiments, learning. And that will be key for the rest of the presentation. Experiments that we can run, things that we can try. By the way, this diagram, I now use it in workshops. At the end of a workshop, for example. I know other people using them at the end of sprints, retrospectives for the Scrum people among the audience, because it's just a great evaluation tool. What are the good practices that we should keep running? What are the stupid mistakes that we have seen? And what are the experiments that we should be trying next time? Like I sometimes draw a funnel at the top, just as a reminder that we have to keep pouring new experiments in, things to try next week. Here's a nice example of a company in Bulgaria. It's actually a Dutch company that used this at the end of a retrospective. You can see that's a Dutch company because they finished this retrospective just before 5 o'clock. See there? Yay! Everyone go home. Very punctual. So this is one idea for you to try in order to run experiments. And we run experiments in order to learn, and we learn in order to come up with creative ideas and be innovative as a company. It's a hot topic nowadays, innovation. You cannot open any magazine, a business magazine, without coming across that word repeatedly. Peter Drucker said it many decades ago. He's one of the most famous management gurus in the world, I think, or was. Not to innovate is the single largest reason for the decline of existing innovations. One of the current biggest gurus in the world, Gary Hamel, said more or less the same thing. Said, forget the Renaissance, ours is the golden age of innovation. Daniel Pink, maybe you've read the book Drive or To Sell is Human, he said something interesting. He said, the discovery and creation of problems rather than superior knowledge sets the creative person apart. So creativity is more important than knowledge. And Einstein already agreed with that many, many years ago. Imagination is more important than knowledge. Because knowledge is limited, but imagination encircles the world. Beautiful, beautiful quote. So, imagination, creativity, innovation, I think software developers contribute a whole lot to that worldwide. So I've come up with 7 rules for creative workers, and that's not just software developers. There's anyone who is doing a creative job, anyone who is trying to be innovative in the way they run their business. It also applies to me as a manager or a speaker or a writer, but it definitely applies to software developers and engineers. I have 7 suggestions, and I will go through each of those 7 and give you some examples of things that I think we all should be doing. Number 1, find many ideas. Obvious, but so few people are actually turning this into a good practice of just finding a lot of ideas. There's a very interesting quote, by the way, that is often attributed to Picasso. good artists copy, great artists steal. I found out that this was actually not said by Picasso, which is sort of ironic. So someone thought that he stole a quote from Picasso, but he didn't. It was actually original. But the quote was about stealing. Very, very interesting. I think these things are funny. So good artists copy, great artists steal, but that's something that many creative people agree on. This presentation is based on at least a dozen books or more, 15 books about creativity, innovation, thousands of notes that I have in my Evernote database. I always make highlights in all the books that I read on Kindle and dump them in my Evernote database so I can simply search for keywords and come up with interesting insights of books that I read a couple of years ago. That is my good practice in order to collect ideas. So many books that I read, I cannot remember everything, but Evernote is my online database, my memory of the good stuff that I found. And you should have a method for that as well, some kind of method of collecting the good stuff that you found. One thing that often comes up is, I just heard the same word the previous session, is diversity. It's just another way of achieving those many ideas. Because sometimes the ideas are in other people's heads, obviously. You just have to pull them out. Diversity is often referred to in management literature, business magazines. One thing that annoys me, this is a pet peeve, sorry, but I have to share it with you. One thing that annoys me is that every time, almost every time, I see an article on Forbes or Harvard Business Review or whatever that says diversity in the title, then the entire article is about adding more women. I don't understand that. I have nothing against women. On the contrary, it's awesome working with women. But just adding more females is a very simplistic approach, I think, towards adding more diversity to a team. This is a picture of my team. I have a remote team of different people in different locations in Europe, one even in Canada. And some people might say, wow, that's a very diverse team. Half of them are women. There's one woman missing there. We have exactly 50-50% women and men. So, wow, very diverse. I would say, whatever. It's not important to me. Some people might say, this is not a diverse team at all because they're all white. This is not diverse. I would say, whatever, is not important for me. Right? For me, what is important is what's in people's brains, how different their brains are. Do we have introverts and extroverts? Do we have people from Eastern Europe and Western Europe or other parts of the world? Do we have masculine brains and feminine brains? That's different from men versus women. So that is diversity for me. For me, diversity sits between the ears, right? Not between the legs. Right. End of pet peeve, sorry. So, I think it is important to find the diversity of the people on my team. So, one thing that we did, the very first session that we had as a team was drawing personal maps. It's just a mind map about yourself as a person. This is me, Jurgen, with my goals and education and family and my hobbies, etc. And we just talk about the personal map. Actually, we do not present the personal map, but the team members then ask questions after you upload or present the personal map. You don't talk about it yourself, you just answer questions. So this is mine. This one is by Lisette. She thought it was a Pinterest exercise or something like that, adding pictures to it. All right, that's fine, that's fine. That's her way of making a personal map. It's awesome. This one is from Hanu. You can see that clearly from the map that Hanu is from Finland, because there's almost nothing on it. My friends from Finland, I'm not kidding, my friends from Finland say the Finnish people pride themselves on never using too much information, never talking too much. They're very silent, reserved people, and I love them for it. This is like finished design applied to a personal map. It's awesome. So, my name is Hannu. I am from Finland. All right, Hannu, where in Finland? Then the questions got started, which is great. I love Hannu, it's awesome. Here's another one. This is a typical picture by Sergey of a software architect. Sergey's architecting his own brain. It's so awesome. It's awesome. He's from Russia. That explains a lot as well, perhaps. So you can see from the diversity of the maps that we already have very diverse people on the team, which is great. I love that. So we should seek out all those ideas, have an approach to achieving diversity and the diverse opinions on a team. But that's not the only thing. Number 2, generate many ideas. I found an interesting story in one of those many books that I read about a pottery maker. He was running a class on teaching students how to make pottery. And the story says that he divided the class in 2 halves. One half of the class he gave the assignment of making the very, very best work of art, the very best pottery that they could come up with, that they could make. There's one best piece. And the other part of the audience, the other part of the class, he gave the assignment of making as much as possible. Quantity, not quality. Just one after the other. Right? And they did that for a couple of weeks. One half was focusing, concentrating on the best piece they could ever make, and the other was one after the other, and again and again. And then they checked at the end who had the best looking, the best, highest rated pieces of pottery. Guess what? It was this part of the class. Why? Because they did so much of it. They practiced and they practiced and they produced a lot of pottery, and that made them skilled at producing those pieces. And on this side, they only made one. They didn't practice. They just tried and tried, but they made only one piece. That story, that kind of thinking emerged again and again in creativity and innovation, that you just have to do a whole lot of stuff, basically a whole lot of crap that you have to make in order to have one piece that is awesome. Something similar was said by Linus Pauling. He won the Nobel Prize 2 times. Only 4 people ever had more than 1 Nobel Prize. And he said, the only way to have a good idea is to have a lot of ideas. Most of them being crap. That's not what he said, but that is, I think, should be there at the end of the sentence. A lot of ideas. And a few of them will be great. So keep generating stuff. I sometimes say, I failed so much. Some people say it takes 10,000 hours to be a master at anything. I failed with so many business ideas. I'm the world's expert at failure. There are very few people, I think, who had so many ridiculous business ideas as I had. Like when I was 14 years old, I wanted to make a disco dance magazine. I'm not kidding. I went around on my bicycle to the record stores and I wanted to sell my disco dance magazine. It was ridiculous. I mean, almost embarrassed just thinking about it. But I tried. It was a stupid idea. But I tried. There was the logo that I created, handmade in the 80s. But I did something, at least. I had a stupid idea. Very important, one thing that comes up again and again, the best ideas are things that you come up with on your own. Before you share them with other people, come up with ideas on your own. Go outside, take a walk, take a shower, whatever. The best ideas are not conceived by committees or groups, by people by themselves. So generate a lot of ideas. And maybe 1 out of 1,000 will be awesome. Then, once you have a good number of ideas, it's time to share them. That's the next step. Talk about it with others in a group. It is said that, I read some research somewhere that when cities double in size, then the productivity and creativity of the people in those cities increases by 10 or 15% per person. Right? That's interesting. So the bigger the cities, the more creative and productive people are per person in those cities. Why? Because of the bigger, denser networks, according to the scientists. So crowds help you improve your ideas and improve your creativity. Interesting enough, there's a phrase that is very famous, there's a book about it even, about the wisdom of the crowd. Well, someone said, I thought it was an interesting quote, he said, it's not about the wisdom of the crowd, but about the wisdom of someone in that crowd. Because that person has an idea, but that idea gets better because he or she is in a crowd, feeding off of everyone, being inspired by all those ideas around her. That's why creative workers always seek out the crowds. You're at the crowd here, so you're doing a good job there already. That's why creative artists, writers, etc., poets, they found each other in salons or whatever. Seeking each other out, forming a crowd in order to bounce off ideas off of each other. Very important that you do that actively. I travel around the world, so it comes naturally to me. Here's a picture I took in Trondheim, where I was at an event for librarians. Fascinating. I've never been among librarians before, but that's a very interesting industry. Basically, their whole reason for existence has disappeared in the last 10 years ago. Who goes to a library to find information? Makes no sense. Google has solved that. So they're trying to reinvent themselves. It is fascinating, coming up with a new purpose for the library in a city. Here's a picture I took in one of my workshops, people improving their ideas in groups through appreciation and criticism. Obviously, a very important part of that. What is very relevant in terms of criticism and coming up with ideas is that it should be peer-to-peer, not committees evaluating ideas. I've been on such a committee. I'm honest here. I've been on an innovation committee. That was a long time ago. I think maybe 8-9 years ago. Me being CIO of the company and a couple of other top managers, we evaluated the ideas that people sent us through the idea box. I think we had 3 ideas that people sent to us. We dismissed them all because they were stupid. And then people stopped sending ideas. I thought that was weird. That was weird. Now I know that this is not the best approach to getting ideas from a crowd. People should be evaluating each other's ideas. Let the crowd do the work for you. People generate many more ideas when they're evaluated by peers. So I am now fascinated by companies who use crowdfunding approaches to the ideas, the innovative ideas in the company. That's awesome. So you come up with an idea and you're listed on the internal stock exchange in the company, and then others can basically vote on your idea or invest in it with virtual money. There are actually virtual money being invested in such ideas. So the crowd is deciding which ideas are the best ones. And then the ones that come out on top with the most votes or the most credits or whatever, those are the ones that management picks in order to fund them with real money. And then you indeed will let the wisdom of the crowd do the job for you. Fascinating. Another example, sort of slightly off topic, but people like the concept, is also about peer-to-peer, but in this case, peer-to-peer crediting of performance. It's basically answering the question, who had the best performance in the organization? How do you answer a question like that? In traditional companies, we managers make the decision. We decide who had the best performance, right? And then maybe give that person a bonus or something like that, right? Traditional bonus approach. At the end of the year, the top manager decides, you get this much, you get that much. There's one thing you know for sure, everyone is going to hate the manager. Except the one who got the most money, obviously. Yeah. Now, I have come that far that I don't want to be that kind of manager anymore. I don't want to be hated by everyone for doing a bad job with my limited information of what the performance in the business is. My opinion is rather useless, actually, because I don't know what's going on. Another opinion that's useless is everyone's opinion of themselves. We all know that 70% of drivers think they are above average drivers. Makes no sense. I read that 80% of college professors think they are above average. These are smart people. They should understand the concept of average and 50%. I think among keynote speakers, 90% think they are above average. Quite sure. So this is useless. The self-ratings of people, self-evaluation. Usually people overestimate their contribution. You know what is useful? How we evaluate each other. That is the most reliable information that we have. We are quite keen observers of what others are doing in the organization. So, what the most inspiring companies do, and I know a good number of them by now, IGN, Linden Labs, creators of Second Life, Shopify.com, several others, they basically divide that whole bonus money pool into equal portions and everyone gets the same amount. On one condition, you cannot keep it for yourself. You have to give it to others. And then let the games begin. Awesome. Awesome. So, for example, I could use my small portion of the bonus money to give 50% to you, because you helped me out last month when I was feeling depressed. I was about to call in sick. I was feeling so terrible because you sat on my bonsai tree. Hate you for that. It was entirely flat. So I was so depressed, I was about to call in sick for the next 6 months, but you helped me through. I really appreciate that. I'm totally over it now. You get 50% of my bonus money. I spread the rest equally among all my other team members, except you. You get nothing. I can do that. It's my little part of the bonus money. This is a ridiculous example, of course. But this is the kind of peer evaluation that can take place. This is what we do at my company. Here you see a screenshot from bonus.lead. That's a peer-to-peer crediting system, which says that it's probably too small for you to read, but at the top it says that I received 25 points from Sergey for my inspiring ideas. Yay, thanks, Sergey. And 15 points from Jennifer, because I was dedicated even when sick. She saw that even when I had the flu, I still did a bit of work. I got credits for that. Thank you, Jennifer. At the bottom, 10 points from Lizette for wearing the same shirt. What the fuck? Well, whatever. Thank you, Lizette. I appreciate that. And those are the points that I gave to my team members. It is all peer-to-peer crediting. The credits accumulate over time, and then after some time, you can convert them to real cash. Now, some people say, the same question always comes up. The same question, always. What about the introverts? Isn't it becoming a popularity contest if everyone is crediting each other? The popular guys and gals will get all the points, the credits. I say maybe. I don't know. Could happen. You don't know until you try. But there's one thing for sure. With the old system, where the manager decides, you already have a popularity contest. It is called kissing the boss's ass. The one who's best able at kissing the boss's ass gets the most bonus money. So by distributing the crediting, you basically turn it into democratized ass kissing. You have to kiss a lot of asses, I can tell you. All year long, your lips will turn blue, for God's sake. First Jennifer, and then Sergey, and then Lizette, and tomorrow Nicholas, kissing all the time. Yes, yeah, that's what it means, to taking care of each other in a culture that is appreciative, where you do things for each other. So that's peer crediting. You decide if it's something for you. But this is a trend. I have seen 5 new tools in the last year or so enabling teams to set up some kind of peer crediting approach. Same as crowdfunding, same as all those other peer-to-peer systems. I saw reference to a Gartner report, very famous research agency. They said that in the next couple of years, half of the companies in the world will have such gamification approaches to performance, innovation, creativity, etc. Because managers understand finally that it's best to leave it to the crowd and we'll let them work it out with each other. All right, so making connections, getting ideas from your peers, being evaluated by your peers, that is a crucial element. But I'm not there yet. A couple more. Number 4, seek diversion. I have a very nice image here, a photo that I took when I was on a plane ride from Canada to the Netherlands, to Amsterdam. At one point I was looking out the window and I saw that we were basically flying between 2 sheets of clouds, one above us and one below us. And it looked so awesome. I just sat there for like 10 minutes like, whoa, whoa, man, whoa. It was like I was on drugs or something, on crack. Whoa, my God, this is amazing. I noticed because I was defocusing, just not paying attention to my work, but just looking around me, being mindful, and then I noticed, oh, wow, this is so cool. And I took a picture of it. Very simple, silly example, but something that you should make time for every now and then. Seek diversion, unfocus, as some people say. So what I sometimes do is I just walk around. When I travel to a city, I just walk around with my camera, my smartphone, and I just take pictures, making sure that I pay attention to what is around me. So, for example, this is a picture that I took in New York. I think it's quite nice. It's quite nice. Just a simple smartphone picture on a train station in New York. Here's a picture that I took in Frankfurt, where the big European bank is. I thought it was a nice thing to play with perspective, because this is the European bank in the back over there. The locks in front of it, sort of a philosophical kind of thing, I thought. And here's a picture, this is one of my favorites. Here's a picture that I took in Bulgaria. There are a lot of communist statues in Sofia, not only in Sofia. And one is uglier than the other. Basically, they're all pretty ugly, right? You've probably seen those statues before. So I was just amazed at the ugliness of the communist statues. Until one time I was walking around one of those butt ugly statues, and I looked and oh, wait a minute. If I look at the statue from here, I have this very interesting perspective that I'm quite sure Stalin has never seen before. Ooh, those naughty, naughty Russians. I hope the sculptor got away with this one. So sometimes you just have to pay attention to what is around you. Mindfulness is a hot topic nowadays. This is just an example of being mindful of what you see around you. You would see things that nobody else has seen before. And some call it unfocusing. Not focusing on your current work is great for creativity. Actually, Freeman Dyson, who was another he's not a Nobel Prize winner, waiting for a Nobel Prize, I think. He said it's very important to be idle, because people who keep themselves busy all the time are generally not creative. I am not ashamed of being idle, he said, of doing nothing. And this is one of the most productive scientists ever. So every now and then, just do nothing and look around you. By the way, it also counts if you just switch between projects. According to the research in creativity, just the switching between projects, like for a couple of weeks you work on this app, whatever, and then you let it go. And then for a good time you work on something else, another kind of application or project, whatever. That's good, because your brains in the background will keep thinking subconsciously about that other project, and it will make connections, and you won't notice it even, but it will help creativity to have different things going on. It's not the same as multitasking. That's at the lower level, right? You shouldn't do that during the day. Keep focus, but every now and then focus on another project. Like I have writing projects, and then I have speaking projects, right? And I have workshop projects, and I switch between those two. That's good for creativity. That's sort of cheating cheating in the unfocusing area. So creative workers take time to unfocus. We're not there yet. 5 more. Number 5 is executing your ideas. I frequently get messages from people that ask me, Jurgen, can we talk about my idea? I have this great idea. Do you have some time to discuss the idea? And a couple of years ago, I often said yes. Yeah, sure, no problem. Have a coffee or whatever. But nowadays, I don't do that anymore. Because you know what I noticed? Almost nobody follows through. They have ideas, but they don't do anything. And I think that's such a waste of my time. So I'm not very interested in the ideas that people have anymore. I'm very interested in the experiments that they ran and the actual actions that they took in order to test their ideas, for how to validate them. Here's a silly example. When I was 8 years old, 8, 9, I don't remember exactly, I was wondering, I like vanilla ice cream, and I also like chocolate. But vanilla ice cream with chocolate together is even better. So I thought, is this a natural law? I was 8 years. Is this a natural law? I was curious. Does this always hold? So I ran an experiment. On one side, I had my mother's homemade chicken soup in a bowl. Delicious. I loved it. She was very good at that. On the other side, I had a glass of fresh orange juice. Yeah. I poured it in the chicken soup. It was horrible, I can tell you. My God. It tasted like vomit. I thought, how can this be? I like them both. And they end up in my stomach all mixed anyway. Well, I flung it down the toilet. I never admitted this to my mother, by the way. She still doesn't know. Don't tell her. So I ran an experiment. In hindsight, I think I feel proud that even when I was that young, I ran an experiment. I learned something. This is not a natural law. The pity is that I was afraid of being punished for having run this experiment. That's a bit sad. I should have gone out there. Yeah, I learned something, and I wasted my chicken soup, but who cares? Now I know something. So I was curious. When I was 11 years old, I saw that there were cartoons in the newspaper, in the national newspaper, NRC Handelsblad, for the Dutch people among you. It had cartoons on page 3, and I could draw. I thought, hey, I can do that. So I made a couple of cartoons, and I sent them to the newspaper, suggesting to them that I would be their new cartoonist. They were horrible. But I didn't just have the idea, I actually did something. And failed, obviously. I got a nice letter back. I have to compliment them there. I actually got a nice letter back from the editor that said, work on your quality a bit more and maybe return to us a few years later. That was very nice of them. So ideas are easy, but action takes courage. It takes a bit of courage to pour your orange juice in your soup, right? Or to send cartoons as an 11-year-old to the national newspaper. Right? Some people lack that courage, it seems. They have a lot of ideas, but there's nothing happening. So I'm not very interested in just hearing ideas. I want to see what actions people took, because execution forces you also to look at all the details. What is getting in the way when you're trying to implement this idea? Ideas look beautiful until you start implementing them. It's also important there to keep different options open, to have multiple approaches to introducing your idea, or different aspects of the idea, because one aspect might fail, but the other might be successful. I have a picture of the London Tube there as a metaphor for having multiple paths toward a destination. It doesn't matter if one line fails, there's always other lines that you can use in the London subway in order to get where you want. Keeping various options open. So one story that I read in one of the innovation books, for example, was about Hewlett-Packard. They were already market leader in laser printers, But then there was this new technology that emerged that was about desk jet printing. Right? This is with ink, smudges, low quality. It sucked. And what Hewlett Packard did was that they didn't know which would be the ultimate winner. So what they did was they invested in both. They basically started a separate company because they knew the current organization would resist it because the quality was inferior. So their current customers, they didn't want that bubble jet technology because it was inferior. But still, they started another company, and that one then grew to dominate a large part of the market as well. They bet on multiple horses, different ideas, different approaches to printing. I have another example here. This is in the past what families did in order to keep all the options open. You wanted at least some of your offspring to survive long enough in order to take care of you when you were old. That's why they had lots of children. And you can see from the picture that the husband was quite happy with the arrangement, but the mother not so much. Perfectly understandable. Keeping all the options open. Multiple approaches to your idea. Don't just bet on one horse. So, creative workers always run experiments, as I showed you at the start. The middle part is where all the learning takes place. Just having an idea is not enough. You actually have to implement it as well. All right, 2 more. Appreciate mistakes. I've come across many mistakes. I'm sure you have as well. Do you know what is the similarity between Coca-Cola and lollipops and Viagra and those are the 3 that I can list off the top of my head. You know what the similarities? They were all invented accidentally. Right? People weren't looking for that solution, but it was invented. Somebody was making a mistake, and then it turned out to be a brilliant invention. You only notice when you're aware of that. So, for example, I have a picture of Goodyear tires here. I read that Goodyear, that was actually a guy named Goodyear, the founder of the company, he was looking for tires that could survive heat and cold, extreme weather conditions. And he tried and couldn't find anything. Until accidentally he spilled some rubber and sulfur and lead on a hot stove. And then the mixture turned out to be pretty strong. It was not something that he would have thought of himself. It was an accident. And then vulcanized rubber was born, basically, was invented. Similar, the pacemaker. Well-known example, there was an electrical engineer who was trying to come up with a device that measured the heartbeat of a human being. But he inserted the wrong resistor, and then the device started mimicking a heartbeat instead of measuring it. And the pacemaker was born. It was unintentional. Last example, there was a chemist in France who knocked over a glass jar, and it fell on the ground and it shattered, but instead of shattering in a lot of pieces, it shattered while staying whole. And he thought, that's weird. And then he investigated why that glass didn't break in a lot of small pieces. It turned out that there was some kind of chemical solution that had recently been in that glass jar. Don't remember what it is. Too complicated for me. But that was when safety glass was born. He never tried to come up with safety glass. So these are mistakes, accidents, silly things that people do, knocking over a table or whatever. And then something magical can happen, but you have to watch for that. You have to look out for such opportunities. You can actually generate such mistakes. I read that bacteria actually increase the mutation rate of their DNA when they are under stress, when the environment is becoming hostile for bacteria. Then they increase mutation rate. That means they intentionally increase the number of errors in their DNA while copying. It means more of them die, but it also means that more innovative solutions are tried in order to survive this stressful environment. When the stress goes away, mutation rates drop again. Fascinating. Fascinating stuff, I think. So pay attention to the mess around you. Don't knock over things intentionally, obviously, but when you do, there might be an invention there. You just pay a little bit of attention to what is happening around you. Appreciate mistakes. Last one of the 7. Learning from failure sort of ties all the way back to the beginning. I'm sure you remember this one. Didn't work. No. We don't see it anymore. No. Has anyone ever had these dot tapes? I had mini discs. I was one of the 10 people in the world, actually, who had a mini disc recorder back then. Never used it. Never used it. Cost me a fortune, the bloody thing. Was a big failure. Some people say QR codes are a big failure. Only marketers love them, but very few people actually use them, but you see them everywhere still. These things fail, though probably all the preparations and the planning, etc., around these ideas, they were quite good. Best practices were being applied to such innovations, but they didn't work in the market. Well, that's just too bad. You don't know until you try whether things will succeed or not. There's one practice in my workshops that I often apply, which is kudo cards. Maybe some of you have heard of them. That's writing a compliment on a card and giving it to another person. Amazing technology. Amazing. The effect it has. It actually generates a smile on another person's face. Try and do that. Just a piece of paper. So, a token of appreciation, and you can implement that in your organization. I know many companies doing that, lots of pictures from companies around the world with kudo boxes or kudo walls, where people just give each other a compliment, write it on a card and put it on a wall. Very successful. Except for once. Except for once. There was a lady in one of my workshops, she said, I had been in another workshop 2 years ago, and they applied kudo cards in the workshop, and it was all very nice, and people were appreciative. But at the end of 2 days, out of those 20 people, I was the only one who had not received the kudo card, and I went home feeling a little bit sad. And I understood that. I understood that. It was a good practice, but even good practices can fail in certain circumstances. Like when everyone gets a card except one person. Of course that makes that person sad. Well, I'm not the kind of trainer who would count the kudo cards and check with the attendees, and if someone is missing, then quickly write the card myself. That would be a bit silly, obviously. But it is good. I love that story. I thanked her for sharing that story, that even good practices can fail. And I think that is, for some of those other examples, whether it's the Concorde or the Minidisc, whatever, they probably did their best in order to make that a success. But sometimes all the good practices can fail as well. And that is a learning opportunity as well. So, 7 rules for creative workers. And that is not just software developers, right? There's anyone who is being creative in their job. This applies to managers. This applies to designers. You don't have to be an artist in order to be creative. Everyone is creative nowadays. Find many ideas, generate many ideas, make connections with other people, seek diversion, execute, appreciate mistakes, and learn from failure. A few more quotes before I shut up and let you go. Eric Schmidt, in his book, How Google Works, amazing book, by the way, he says, the Googlers, we don't call them knowledge workers anymore. No, not in a traditional sense, because they're a new kind of animal. We call them smart creatives. And they're the key to achieving success in the internet century. Eric Ries, famous for the Lean Startup, said that this innovation thing in organization is a bottoms-up, decentralized, and unpredictable thing, but it doesn't mean that it cannot be managed. It can be managed. You can manage organizations in such a way that people are incentivized to find ideas, to give feedback on each other instead of having managers do all that job, to allow them to seek some diversion and all that kind of stuff. That is what managers can enable in the environment. It is exactly what Ed Catmull does, one of the founders of Pixar Animation Studios, probably the most successful movie studio ever, because all their films have been blockbuster hits. There's no other movie studio who has achieved something like that. And he says, my job as a manager is to create a fertile environment. Keep it healthy and watch for the things that undermine it. Awesome book, by the way. Creativity Inc. I really can recommend it. I gave it 5 stars. So, lots of books that I read, all the stories I shared with you, I stole them. I didn't come up with anything myself. Right? I got them from a lot of different sources, all from these books. Don't worry, I'll give you a download link in a minute. Last comment. I wrote this book, Management 3.0 Workout. There's a copy here on paper, but it's also available for free. You can download it in a moment if you want. What I find important is that people run experiments, that they try things. Don't just come up with ideas, but actually go to the execution phase. And I'm quite sure that you have heard a lot of ideas in the last 3 days. Hopefully you made a good number of notes. Now select one of those ideas and actually do something with it, because you will never know whether things succeed or fail until you try. Believe me, I have seen many, many people, 9 out of 10, who don't go to the execution phase. You have to try. I've never been afraid of trying. I tried having an internet startup. It blew up. Yay, I learned. Awesome. Now it's just a good story. There's one nice compliment that I received recently from one of my team members, Jennifer. Jennifer said to me, you know what, Jurgen? You are my first manager who doesn't suck. I had to think about that for a moment. I said, thanks, Jennifer. I think that's a compliment. I think that's a compliment. It means that I achieved quite a lot so that I don't suck anymore, but there's still room for improvement. That is nice to know. That is nice to know. And I think I achieved that position because I have never been afraid of trying things. We try peer crediting, which we call merit money in our company. We give each other points, and yes, it converts to real bonus money. It is an experiment that we're running, and we're loving it so far. So far, so good. Other experiments, they fail, fine. But at least I try as a manager. And that is what I think sets me apart from many others out there, why I don't suck. So, it's your job to turn your ideas into experiments. And maybe in a couple of years, you will be among those few software developers who don't suck. All right? Enjoy. Here's a download link. Thank you very much for listening.